Hey guys. All right, so I'm gonna keep this video as brief as possible, first of all. So stay tuned, But I wanna handle a couple business things for the class, because we haven't met this past week, and also next week's class. As a matter of fact, let's start there. Number one, if you look at your syllabus, and I know you have not, you should, you'll notice all it says on the last day: student evals, final concerns. That's pretty standard stuff. I mean, some of your classes, you may have a final exam, something like that. And maybe you have some kind of last lecture or study thing. We don't memorize stuff in this class, so it's not really the same kind of class. What I'm getting at is, I suppose in a class like that, there may be a reason for a last class, but all we would do in our last class, because we have no exam, is exactly what it says on the syllabus. I would stand in front of you and say pretty much what I'm about to say to you in this video, actually. And then I'd leave. I'd ask you to do the student evals, and then we would all go. And I kind of honestly feel like a jerk, especially because now the student evals are online. They didn't used to be. I would kind of feel like a jerk asking you all to come in for 15 minutes, something like that, and then leave. Especially some of you commute, or whatever. You would justifiably be a little upset with me. So what I've proposed instead, just now, is we don't meet that Monday. The evals, which I'm going to talk about in a second, are online. I believe they are on Courseden. I know you've received emails about them. I also know most of you don't check your email, which is of course a problem. You should. You really should. Just like in life, it's gonna benefit you. It is. But anyway, I believe you go to Courseden and you'll have course evaluations for all of your classes, however many you may have. They're pretty painless. They're anonymous. They're optional, actually. Although I know I do. I'm sure most of you teachers do actually appreciate if you do them. But anyway, you go to Courseden. It's a lot of bubbles. You guys are pretty used to that, I imagine, just clicking stuff. And then I believe there's a short answer section that you don't have to do either if you don't want. So for instance, when I was a student, I would always do the bubbles. I wouldn't do the short answer. I didn't really think it mattered. Quick note on that, and then some thoughts about the class. I'll try to keep it around 10 minutes. Don't freak out. Evals. I can't really think of any classes I straight up hated. Maybe college algebra, and I've kind of talked about that already. I'm not a math guy. But outside of that, all the classes I ever had, I kind of thought were awesome to varying degrees. Now, I always did evals. I felt like I should, even though they were optional. But I never did the short answer. And the reason I point all that out is I think most students, at worst, think a class is okay. They're like, yeah, it was fine. This element was good. This element wasn't quite as good, but it was all pretty good. I had a good time, as classes go. It's not like going to a water park, but that's not the scale we're using. And I say that because here's what tends to happen to evals. You guys don't know this. I did not know this until I was on the other side. I was on the teacher side of it, okay? What tends to happen is most people don't take them, okay? And they are optional, and I get that. But what also tends to happen is there's, statistically, one or two people, not in every class, but if you teach 4 classes a semester, 20 some odd kids every class, you're gonna have at least 1 or 2 students who, for one reason or another, didn't like you or your class or the grade they got, or they had other shit going on, but that led to stuff in the class and now they're taking it out on it. They are gonna respond to the eval. You feel me? Which is their right, and that's totally fine. But here's my point. Especially if you're in a class that you enjoyed for one reason or another, or worst case scenario, thought was fine, and you don't take the eval, what tends to happen, say you get 5 or 6 responses to an eval, but then one of those responses is one of those students who, as I mentioned before, is absolutely going to respond. It skews the numbers. It skews the numbers hard. And more importantly, actually, it skews the comments. Again, most people who take an eval don't comment. I did not. I wish I had, quite honestly. I had a lot of good teachers. I just didn't think I didn't think they'd read them. I didn't think it mattered. They do read them. It does matter. And I say that because, again, if you're teaching a class, you get 5 or 6 evals, and one of those students, according to the eval, hates your fucking guts, and they tell you as much. Reading those other 4, especially if most of them don't comment or whatever, it tilts the scales, right? In your head, it's like the worst the worst feedback I ever got for a class, a student actually insulted my wife, you know? Like, some of you are out there are like, how? And I was like, exactly, how? But they do. It gets pretty rough sometimes. So all I'm saying is, for my class, but also for all your classes, don't take that stuff for granted. It doesn't take long. I wouldn't sit down and do them all at once. That sounds awful. But knock one out here, knock one out there. Your teachers really appreciate it. And especially if you liked something about the class, let them know. That helps me to maybe keep it later, right? I mean, if you have something constructive, that's fine too. But most people who comment, if they comment, it's all like, I hate this, or I hate your face, and it's stuff like that. You can really help somebody out with like, hey, this worked really well for me. I really appreciate it. You know, it's like, oh, that really helped these 2 students. I got to make sure we do that, right? Or it goes further than you think, is my point. Okay, last thing, and then we're done. Closing remarks on the class. When I teach a class, and I teach all kinds of classes, I teach comp, creative writing. I taught a class about movies this semester. All kinds of classes. I have 2 main goals in mind. The first one is the same across my classes, and it is this. It is my sincere hope that whatever your experience in the class, I truly hope you took away either a thought or an experience that you would not have had otherwise. And what I mean by that is, I remember as a student, I mean, maybe not every class, but I would say damn near every class that I took, I always came away thinking like, oh man, that book we read, or that I remember this discussion we had about whatever, you know. And I recognized at the time, and this is why I stress it, because I don't know if you guys do, I recognized at the time I would not have had those thoughts, those experiences, wouldn't have encountered that material without the classes I was in. That's what college is supposed to be. Like, jobs, fine, jobs, get a job, whatever. Okay, fuck that. College is supposed to be, here's a really cool idea or book or movie, whatever. Here's a really cool thing you would not have seen without this class. And if even once that happened for you, I consider the class at least partly a success. That's my primary goal in all my classes. I just want you to think about stuff that you would not have thought about without the class. So that's my hope. Number 2, when it comes to comp classes, especially 1101, 1102, I do this as well, but we were about other things, you know. 1101, for most of you, it's one of the first classes you take, if not the first class you take. And then there's writing, and we do that stuff. But to me, again, it's like the very first class you take, because it's in the core as well, that actually ask you to think. And what I mean by that is, most of your other classes, like say you're in a biology class right now. I remember my biology class. We would go in every day, and she would have a PowerPoint, and we would take notes on that PowerPoint while she talked about it, and then we'd leave. And every once in a while we'd come in and we'd take a test on that PowerPoint. That was the whole class. I'm not saying there's not value in that, but I don't ask you to memorize much. I mean, we did some form stuff, you know, but that's not what the class is. The class is harder for some of you because of this, but I want you to think. I want you to question things. I want you to the best of your ability, express those thoughts, which I think some of you realize this semester is maybe harder than you thought, but that's good. That means it's that means it's worthwhile. Very few things in this life that are worthwhile are easy. And that kind of sucks sometimes, but I believe that to be true. So if at any point you found the class difficult, or a more constructive term I would use is challenging, I would say That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to challenge you. And there's all kinds of ways that can manifest too. I think a few of you, especially like a couple of people came into class late and like came into discussion late. And it's funny because a lot of the time we're talking about context and they don't have context and they think we're talking about something we're not. It's a whole problem. But again, I would say whatever the discussion we had, very rarely is it just, well, I think this and you must think this. I would say never, actually. I try to be pretty open with what you guys have to offer me. What I'm after is I want you to consider what you think. And then by the end of class, if you just feel that way even more, that's fine, as long as you have examined it, right? But occasionally you change your mind, or occasionally you still think a thing, but you think about it in a slightly different way. You have more information now. You've turned the gears more. And again, that's what the class is supposed to be. I think that's what college is supposed to be. But if you feel like you've done that in any capacity, and especially if you think you can kind of take that with you out of this class, even a little bit, I think it's been a success. That's all I've been after, all class, is I want to show you some cool shit. I want to have some discussions about it, right? And yeah, we got to write papers. By the way, we don't decide those. Granted, it's a writing class. I would have to have you write, but teachers don't get to pick everything. But my point is, it is my sincere hope that as burgeoning adults, you're able to take the kinds of things we've talked about, the kinds of thoughts you've had, and apply those just going forward. It's a more fulfilling life to question everything around you. Even, again, things right now that you take for granted, that you just assume is that way because it's supposed to be. Everything around you is made. It's been built. Every belief, everything. Somebody made that, and they had thoughts then, and they were maybe trying to do a good thing, and maybe they did, and sometimes they didn't, and sometimes it's wrong now because times have changed. Like, question that stuff. If you do that, we've done our job. Also, some of you may have, I'm done now, some of you may have some thoughts about my background. This is my oldest son's room. He's 5, so this is what a 5-year-old bedroom looks like. He loves Star Wars. As you see a couple things, yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys are well. I want to end with, hit me up. Some of you have, some of you never do, which I understand. I didn't do that when I was a student. But if you have thoughts, questions about the class, what we got left, which is just the project, right? Or anything, let me know. I'm here. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later. Thanks.